However, Dicky manages to jump the obstacle, even when he lowers the bar for him. He also breaks the treadmill with supernatural speed and swims with unbelievable agility. The movie begins with a young boy named Dicky Chow, wearing worn-down shoes and a face covered in dirt. A teacher, Mr. Cow, scolds him for his untidiness. Fortunately, the kind teacher named Miss Ewan decides to take over and sincerely talks to Dicky. Dicky explains that no one can bring him to school since he has no mother and his father works in construction. Miss Ewan gently cleans his face with her handkerchief and asks to meet his father one day. But he says his father is always busy. In class, the students talk about what they want to be when they grow up, such as artists and entrepreneurs. When it's Dicky's turn to answer, he says he wants to be poor because his father says that if a person is full of integrity and educated, even poor, he will be respected. The class is silent except for his friend, Fanny, who claps for him. Mr. Cow accidentally drops his pen on the floor. Dicky then gets up and picks it up for him. However, Mr. Cow shoos him away, orders him to put the pen back on the floor, and uses a tissue to pick it up. Meanwhile, Dicky's father, T, tirelessly works as a construction worker. During lunch, Dicky's wealthy classmate, Johnny, shows off his newest expensive toy, a robot dog named CJ1, to the rest of his classmates. He bullies a student for being too short and mocks a big girl named Maggie for eating a lot of food. Dicky appears and asks them to leave her alone, but the bullies tease him for being poor. Later gym class begins, but Dicky is punished for wearing a pair of worn-down sneakers, which his teacher claims are unsuitable for PE. Moments later, Maggie appears beside him and informs him that she pretended to have forgotten her sneakers to be with him. Dicky shamelessly says his father took his shoes out of the trash. Despite this, he wants new sneakers since he loves sports. While working, T struggles, and his boss tells him to leave. However, T asks him to let him stay because he wants to buy an electric fan for his son, who can't sleep at night due to the heat. His boss questions why he goes through so many difficulties for his son to study at a private school, and T says he wants Dicky to have more opportunities in life and not end up like him. Upon hearing this, his boss allows him to continue working. Later, T goes home to an old broken building with an electric fan as a gift. Dicky is happy with it, but unfortunately, the fan doesn't work. T says it worked when he bought it earlier, and Dicky calls him dumb for being ripped off. T tells him not to swear, and despite being poor, he educates his son on good morals and to focus on his studies, unlike him. Dicky and T choose to find joy in simple things. They turn catching and killing cockroaches in their tiny house into a nightly hobby they both enjoy. One day, they're watching the television displayed on the window when the news informs the public about an unidentified flying object. While T watches the news, Dicky enters the toy store and finds a toy similar to Johnny's. He promises that if his father buys CJ1, he will never ask for anything again. However, T has no money and asks him to leave the toy. Dicky disobeys and insists on taking it, so his father hits him. He cries and runs out of the store. T then finds him with his teacher, Miss Ewan, comforting him. Miss Ewan informs him that she wants to visit him at his house to talk about Dicky, as she believes that parents should also participate in their children's education. However, T claims to be too busy at work. That night, T searches through the garbage dump, eventually finding a pair of sneakers. Unbeknownst to him, the UFO that was reported earlier is there. He sees a television that surprisingly turns on along with the other devices. The UFO flies away, only leaving a green ball in its wake, which T gives to Dicky as an apology gift. The following day, Dicky excitedly shares his mysterious toy with his friend, Fanny. Johnny and his friends show up to torment him, saying it looks like trash. Dicky claims his toy is called CJ7 and is much better than CJ1. He threatens to hit him if Johnny keeps talking badly about his dad. At that moment, Johnny blows a whistle, and his gigantic classmate, nicknamed Stormdragon, appears. He grabs Dicky by the arm and launches him away. Later, T scolds Dicky after seeing the bruise on his face and the rip on his school uniform, warning him not to fight despite being poor. While his father scolds him, Dicky accidentally turns the toy on, and the ball starts to move, and several spikes emerge on its surface. Suddenly, a black hole appears, which scares Dicky, throwing the ball away. He tells his father that the ball is cursed and sees ghosts around the house. However, T ignores him and tries to fix the uniform. The closet door next to the bed opens, and Dicky looks inside. He finds a strange creature moving and screams. Out of annoyance, his father puts him in the closet to shut him up. The toy is now a cute, fuzzy-faced, big-eyed creature. However, when T checks up on him, he hides the creature. As T leaves to work, Dicky tries to find out what that thing is and asks it questions. He assumes it's an alien dog from another universe and eventually names it CJ7. Then, CJ7 finds a rotten apple and uses its powers to make it fresh. Because of this, Dicky is convinced he has found a magical dog. The following day, Dicky and CJ7 encounter a vicious street dog. Dicky proposes that if it defeats the dog, it will prove that it's a super dog from space. Surprisingly, CJ7 beats the dog with its kung fu skills. Dicky proudly goes to school with CJ7 on his shoulder. At school, he finds out he has a big test, so he asks CJ7's help in getting a 100 on the test. CJ7 immediately creates a pair of sunglasses to help him answer the exam. During the exam, tiny drones come out of the glasses, which allows him to see Johnny's answers. However, Johnny thinks they're flies and swats them, accidentally hitting Mr. Cow. Later, it's revealed that Dicky got a perfect score on the exam for the first time. However, when Mr. Cow asks to check his glasses, it explodes. Their next class is PE. Dicky asks for a pair of super sneakers from CJ7, which he quickly makes for him. The coach shows the students his jumping record and claims that no one has ever been able to break it. However, Dicky manages to jump the obstacle, even when he lowers the bar for him. He also breaks the treadmill with supernatural speed and swims with unbelievable agility. When his PE teacher asks about the shoes, Dicky ignores him, leading them to fight. When police officers come to arrest him, he flies away with the help of his sneakers. However, Dicky is woken up when T comes home from work and realizes it was all a dream. T tells him to go to school, so he quickly gets in his uniform and enthusiastically promises to get a 100 on the test. Without any hesitation, he excitedly prepares and rushes to school. Like his dream, Dicky and CJ7 encounter a vicious street dog on their way to school, but CJ7 is defeated, leaving the two with bruises and wounds on their bodies. At the school bathroom, Dicky is annoyed with CJ7 but still wishes for him to help him with his test. With his hand out asking for a magic weapon, CJ7 only poops on it. Confused about what to do, he takes it with him during the test. He looks at the poop, hoping to find an answer, but nothing happens. Johnny finds the poop on his hand and shoves it on Dicky's face, embarrassing him. An annoyed Dicky pushes CJ7's head down the toilet and claims he was tricked by it. He orders it to hand over its magic weapons, but it only blasts him with poop. Later, the gardeners hose him down to clean him. After school, Dicky approaches CJ7, apologizing and coaxing it to come out. Still, he intends to capture it and throws it in the trash, abandoning it. He soon realizes that CJ7 never promised anything, and it was all his fault for expecting him to be magic. He tries to run to get CJ7 back, but the trash collector collects the garbage, leaving him in tears. Later, he tells his father that he lost CJ7, but T shows that it was waiting for him there and has already forgiven him of his actions earlier. The two hug each other while T wonders where it came from and how CJ7 works. He squeezes the alien dog to test and randomly checks any batteries of why such a creature works like that. That night, with the two asleep, CJ7 notices that Dicky appears uneasy while resting due to the heat. CJ7 uses his magic antenna to fix the fan. It gets exhausted immediately and goes back to sleep. The following day, T wonders how the fan is finally working. Dicky then surprises him with his perfect test. On their way to school, a tired CJ7 is on Dicky's shoulders when Johnny and his friends see them. CJ7 tries to hide, but Johnny gets it and uses various tools to discover what's inside it. Dicky tries to stop him from destroying CJ7, so he tries to fight and stop Johnny. But Storm Dragon appears all of a sudden. Fortunately, Dicky's friend, Maggie, comes to the rescue. They fight each other, and Maggie wins, assuring that Dicky is just fine. When Mr. Cow notices the commotion, they all get punished by standing outside under the sun. Later, CJ7 approaches Dicky, and he shows him off to his classmates, who are all impressed by it. Meanwhile, T proudly shares with his coworkers that his son scored perfectly. However, his boss doesn't believe it and assumes that Dicky changed the 0 to get 100. The two argue about it, and T gets fired from the job. But later, T decides to speak to Dicky about his exam. Later, T confronts him, to tell the truth about his exam. Once again, he instills the value of honesty and the significance of education despite being poor. Eventually, Dicky admits that he intentionally changed the grade because he didn't want to disappoint his father. As a consequence, T punishes him by confiscating CJ7. Dicky angrily says he doesn't want a dad like him. So, T proposes to leave him alone if he gets above 60 on the next exam without cheating, and the two agree to the deal. Despite their fight, T brings Dicky's lunch to school, where he finds Miss Ewan. Dicky tells her about their argument, and she offers to help him pass the exam. Later, T T returns to work and attempts to speak with the boss. Unexpectedly, the boss apologizes for what he said and still believes that the young boy will succeed. T becomes hopeful to continue working to make a living for his son. At the same time, Dicky tries his best, passing the exam and finally getting a 65. Unfortunately, a horrible accident happens at the construction site, where T falls to his death while CJ7 watches him helplessly. Miss Ewan brings Dicky to the hospital and shares the terrible news of T's death. Dicky asks her to leave, saying he needs to sleep so that when he wakes up, his father will return alive. At the hospital, CJ7 manages to get out of T's bag. Upon seeing his condition, it tries to revive him. T's wounds begin to heal on the first attempt, but it's still not enough to wake him up. So, it uses its full powers to the point of exhaustion. The following day, Dicky awakens to find his father beside him. Overwhelmed with emotion, he warmly embraces T, asking him never to leave. He promises to be good and focus on his studies. They then notice CJ7 appearing exhausted, with its antenna flashing red, eventually fading until it becomes a small doll. They attempt several alternatives to bring back CJ7, but something else is needed. Still, Dicky remains hopeful that someday CJ7 will live again. Before the new term starts, the class has a picnic before returning to school, and everyone is happy and peaceful. Stormdragon expresses his attraction for Maggie, while Maggie likes Dicky. On the other hand, Dicky and Fanny like each other, but Johnny always steals her away from him. Despite things going well, Dicky remains hopeful that someday he will be with his little friend CJ7 again. The movie ends as a spaceship lands, and many other aliens like CJ7 of different colors and patterns emerge. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.